Grand Ole Opry, a night in August 2025. The lights still blaze, the stage still waits. Yet the microphone at center stage, the one Jeannie Seely had gripped with trembling but proud hands for nearly 60 years, now stands alone under the spotlight. The audience falls silent, and Nashville seems to hold its breath. On August 1st, 2025, devastating news spread across America. Jeannie Seely, Miss Country Soul, the woman who shook the very walls of the Opry with her whispered voice and soul-drenched ballads, was gone at the age of 85. She passed away in a Tennessee hospital after months of unrelenting pain. But the haunting question remained. What truly claimed the final breath of an artist so enduring, so unyielding? A legend who graced that stage over 5,000 times now rests in silence. The microphone still glows, the spotlight still burns, but that voice will never rise again. And to understand how a poor girl from Pennsylvania emerged from the shadows of poverty, survived heartbreak and tragedy, and rose to become an immortal icon of country music, we must journey back to the very beginning, where the story of Jeannie Seely first began. Early life. Marilyn Jean Seely, a name that would one day sparkle under the lights, began her journey in the shadows of poverty. She was born on July 6, 1940, in Titusville, Pennsylvania, a small town tucked between forests and farmland in America's Northeast. The country was still reeling from the Great Depression and already bracing itself for the storm of World War II. In that world of uncertainty, few children of working-class families ever dreamed of becoming artists. But Jeannie was different. Her father was an oil field worker, her mother a tireless homemaker raising a house full of children on meager wages. Their wooden shack leaked whenever it rained, the floors groaned with every step, and winter cold cut through every crack. Jeannie grew up with the howl of the wind through broken windows, the ache of hunger gnawing at night, and dinners of beans and cornbread that only rarely included a scrap of bacon, a luxury the family treated like a holiday feast. Her clothes were hand-me-downs from her older siblings, patched and frayed. She owned just one pair of shoes, worn so thin that when it rained, water seeped in and left her feet numb all day at school. Yet Jeannie never complained. In Titusville, that was simply the way of life for country children. Stormy nights left the deepest mark. Rain would drip through the ceiling, soaking the beds, forcing the children to huddle together in a dry corner. Her mother would lay a sheet of old plastic across the rafters while the family curled up, shivering, waiting for daylight. And in those moments, young Jeannie would softly hum the tunes she remembered from the family's old radio, her fragile voice rising above the storm as if singing could push back the fear. That radio, perched on a shaky shelf, was the family's most prized possession. Every evening they gathered around it to listen to the sounds drifting from the Grand Ole Opry. Names like Kitty Wells, Hank Williams, Ernest Tubb, and Patsy Cline seeped into Jeannie's imagination. For her, music was not just entertainment, it was hope. It was a promise of another world, distant yet dazzling, where a voice could change destiny. Jeannie revealed her will early on. Strong-willed, stubborn even, she refused to accept that poverty was her fate. Once, she looked at her mother and declared, "One day, I'll stand on the stage of the Opry." Not to dream, but to sing. The adults chuckled, dismissing it as childish fantasy. But Jeannie never forgot those words. By 1950, when she was just 10 years old, the family's hardships deepened. Her parents took on debts, and Jeannie, along with her siblings, had to help in the fields. Some days she bent her back, pulling weeds or picking corn, her small hands swollen red from the cold. But instead of crying, she sang, singing to drown the pain, singing to give herself strength. Those years carved two truths into her soul. First, that poverty could break a person or forge them into steel, and second, that music was not a pastime, but survival itself. From that struggle, her voice took shape. Not loud, not showy, but tender, aching, intimate, as if she were whispering secrets directly into your heart. No one in Titusville believed that a skinny girl in a patched dress and worn-out shoes would one day silence Nashville with her voice. But it was from that place of hardship that her legend began. Early career. By the late 1950s, while most young women in Pennsylvania settled quietly into small-town lives, Jeannie Seely was already dreaming of Nashville. In 1956, at just 16, she juggled school with odd jobs, typing, clerking in offices, all to keep her dream alive. At night, she bent over an old notebook, filling its pages with lyrics. Every line was a secret promise to herself. One day, I will stand on the stage of the Opry. In the early 1960s, Jeannie made a daring leap. She left Pennsylvania for Los Angeles. For a poor girl, it was an audacious move. By day, she worked in the copyright department at Liberty Records. By night, she haunted small recording studios, begging anyone to give her a chance. Many turned her away. Some even laughed. This tiny girl thinks she's going to be a star. But Jeannie refused to give up. Then, in 1964, the breakthrough came. One of her songs, Leavin' and Sayin' Goodbye, was recorded by Dottie West, and it became a hit. For the first time, Nashville heard the name Jeannie Seely. But Jeannie wasn't content with just writing. She wanted to sing her own truth. She wanted audiences to feel her pain in her voice, not just her words. In 1965, she signed with Monument Records, and only a year later, in 1966, Nashville would be shaken. Radios across America lit up with a haunting new ballad, Don't Touch Me. Behind that song lay whispers of scandal. It had been written by Hank Cochran, a brilliant but notoriously romantic songwriter. And when Jeannie sang Don't Touch Me If You Don't Love Me, she poured into it a torment that felt far too real. Nashville began to whisper, was this just a song or a confession of a forbidden love? That raw honesty made the song not just a hit, but a cultural shockwave. Don't Touch Me soared into the Billboard Country Top 10, and in 1967, it earned Jeannie Seely the Grammy Award for Best Female Country Vocal Performance. For the first time in decades, a woman's whispered heartbreak had silenced Nashville itself. The industry watched in awe and in doubt. If this success came from real pain, they wondered, would Jeannie Seely be strong enough to survive once the lights dimmed? But the title was about more than her voice. Jeannie brought to country music a new dimension, soft yet fierce, fragile yet unyielding. In an era when Nashville preferred its female stars polished and proper, she sang about raw desire, heartbreak, and even rebellion. The hits came quickly. It's Only Love, 1966. A Wanderin' Man, 1967. I'll Love You More Than You Need, 1968. In 1969, her duet with Jack Green, Wish I Didn't Have to Miss You, became an anthem for broken hearts and sealed their legacy as one of Opry's golden pairs. Career success. In the summer of 1966, when Don't Touch Me swept across radio stations nationwide, Nashville fell silent. Jeannie Seely's velvet voice, tender yet blazing with fire, melted hearts everywhere. The song climbed to number 2 on the Billboard Country chart, and carried her all the way to the Grammy stage, where she became the first female country artist to bring home the award for Best Female Country Vocal Performance. That night, under the stage lights, a small woman in a sparkling dress was crowned before the eyes of the nation. A star had been born, Miss Country Soul. But Jeannie didn't just sing songs, she changed culture. That same year, 1966, she shattered one of Opry's unwritten rules when she walked on stage in a short skirt. Gasps rippled through the audience. Women at the Opry had always been expected to appear modest, restrained. But as the spotlight fell on Jeannie, cheers erupted. That skirt became more than fashion. It was a declaration of independence. Overnight, Seely transformed from singer into symbol, an emblem of women refusing to be confined. Through the 1970s, she held firm. In 1973, Can I Sleep in Your Arms returned her to the Billboard Top 10, proving her voice had lost none of its ache. She became a fixture at the Grand Ole Opry, where fans nicknamed her the Lady Who Never Left. But with triumph came darkness. In 1977, Seely was nearly killed in a car accident that left her body battered and her future uncertain. For most, it would have meant the end. For Jeannie, it was another scar, and every ballad she sang afterward carried that scar in its voice. By the 1980s and 1990s, when country pop stars like Garth Brooks, Alan Jackson, and Shania Twain dominated airwaves, record labels turned their backs on her. Nashville forgot the woman it once called Miss Country Soul. Yet every week, Jeannie Seely still walked onto the Opry stage. While others faded, she stood steady, smiling, whispering her songs as if to an old friend. That steadfastness transformed her into more than a singer. She became a living guardian of Opry tradition. Each time she sang, the audience was reminded that authentic country still lived. From 2000 onward, Seely embraced her role as mentor, collaborator, and keeper of the flame. She inspired younger artists, proving that truth mattered more than trends. In 2017, she released Written in Song, an album of her own compositions, many of which had already become hits for others. It was a reminder that Jeannie Seely was not just a voice, but a writer who knew the inner struggles of women better than anyone. Even as her health declined, she refused to leave the stage. In 2020, at 80 years old, she still stood beneath Opry's lights. Her voice was no longer flawless, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. On August 1st, 2025, Nashville mourned the loss of Jeannie Seely. After a string of surgeries and painful complications, Miss Country Soul slipped away at the age of 85. The Opry microphone dimmed that night. The spotlight still shone, but her voice was gone, yet the legacy remained. A Grammy, a string of timeless hits, a life spent shattering stereotypes, and nearly 6 decades of loyalty to the Grand Ole Opry. When the microphone at Opry stands in silence, the world knows. Miss Country Soul has left the stage, but her spirit will echo forever in every country ballad whispered after her. Controversy and tragedy. If Jeannie Seely's career was a song, then behind the bright spotlight of the Grand Ole Opry were the sorrowful, haunting notes. Notes that lived not only in her music, but in her very life. Her first marriage to songwriter Hank Cochran began like a fairy tale in 1969. He was a genius, a hitmaker, and she was the rising star he adored. But behind the glamour, Jeannie endured emotional abuse, explosive arguments, and a widening gulf between them. Cochran wanted her to stand in his shadow, but Seely, with her fiery personality and fearless voice, refused. By 1979, the marriage ended in heartbreak. Years later, she would admit, "I lost a husband, but I kept myself." But tragedy didn't stop there. In 1977, a horrific car accident left her severely injured. Many believed her career was finished. Lying in a hospital bed, Jeannie herself feared she might never sing again. And yet, true to form, she fought back. When she finally returned to the stage, her voice carried an even deeper ache, as if every scar had turned into melody. Her boldness often drew fire. From the infamous short skirt she wore at the Opry in 1966 to the daring performances that followed, she was branded by traditionalists as too rebellious, too unfit for classic country. But Jeannie never backed down. Her answer was always in the music, the one language no critic could silence. By the 1980s and 1990s, Nashville shifted toward country pop. Voices like Seely's, raw, aching, traditional, were quietly pushed aside. She no longer charted, no longer filled headlines, yet she refused to disappear. Week after week, Jeannie stood on the Opry stage, a quiet but unyielding declaration. Real country still lived. Then, at the end of her life, tragedy returned in relentless waves. Beginning in 2023, her health declined rapidly. She endured multiple surgeries on her spine, her abdomen, each leaving her weaker. In June 2025, she was rushed into the ICU with severe pneumonia. The news leaked, and Nashville trembled. Fans believed Miss Country Soul would overcome this trial too, just as she had survived accidents and years of obscurity. But on August 1st, 2025, the Grand Ole Opry delivered the crushing news. Jeannie Seely had passed away at 85. The shock reverberated through Nashville. Whispers followed. Some said post-surgery complications were to blame. Others claimed she had quietly endured unbearable pain in her final months. Fans murmured, "She left in silence," just like the sorrowful ballads she used to sing. At her Opry memorial, the familiar microphone still stood under the spotlight, but this time there was no whispering voice to fill the air. Many in the audience wept, for they knew that for Jeannie Seely, tragedy wasn't just part of her story, it was what etched her name into history. She lived a life of controversy and tragedy. A broken marriage, a devastating car crash, years of neglect, illness, and finally, death in pain. But it was those very shadows that gave her voice its gravity, turning every ballad into more than a song. It became something to feel, to grieve, and to never forget. Personal life. Behind the bright lights of the Grand Ole Opry, Jeannie Seely was still just a woman, flesh and blood, longing for love and peace like anyone else. But throughout her life, she never truly found lasting happiness. Her marriage to Hank Cochran, which began in 1969, seemed destined, a brilliant songwriter paired with a rising voice. In reality, it became a chain of bitter days. Cochran, with his fiery temper and demanding career, often left Jeannie feeling cast aside. Many nights, after pouring her soul out on the Opry stage, she returned home only to face cold silence, or cutting words from the very man who once vowed to love her. The marriage ended in 1979, but the emotional scars lingered forever. After the divorce, Jeannie had a few fleeting relationships, but none could fill the void in her heart. In a 1995 interview, she admitted, "I can sing for the whole world, but when I walk into a quiet room, it's still just me in the darkness." A painful confession, one that revealed a loneliness her fans never saw under the stage lights. Yet Seely did not drown in sorrow. Her closest friends, Dolly Parton, Connie Smith, Jack Green, became her chosen family. They shared their struggles, leaned on one another, and survived the ruthless tides of Nashville together. Jeannie also found solace in the hymns of her childhood church in Pennsylvania. That faith became her anchor, especially in her final years when illness tested her strength. Unlike many women her age, she didn't have a home filled with children and grandchildren. But Jeannie had another kind of family, her audience. Her loyal fans, the ones who called her Miss Country Soul, became her greatest comfort. They sent flowers to her dressing room, wrote her letters by hand, and when she lay in a hospital bed, hundreds of prayers flooded across social media. Once, in her 80s, Seely stood on the Opry stage and smiled. "I may not have a man's hand to hold at the end of my life, but I have thousands of hands clapping for me every night, and that's enough." The crowd laughed, then cried at the bittersweet truth of her words. The personal life of Jeannie Seely was a ballad of love, loss, loneliness, and faith. And it was that mixture, never whole, never perfect, that shaped Miss Country Soul. She wasn't flawless, but she was real. Real enough that audiences could see themselves in every word she sang. Legacy and influence. They called her many names: Miss Country Soul, the Whisper of Nashville, the Keeper of the Country Ballad. But every title pointed to the same truth. Jeannie Seely turned sorrow into art and fragility into a strength that left audiences breathless. Her ballads were never showy. There were no piercing high notes, no forced theatrics. Jeannie needed only a whispered line, sung low and aching to make the entire Grand Ole Opry fall silent. People would say, "When Seely sings, you don't just hear music, you hear your own heart speaking back to you." That honesty made her irreplaceable. In 1966, when Jeannie dared to walk onto the Opry stage in a short skirt above her knees, she didn't just wear a piece of fashion, she shattered an invisible barrier. That moment was a declaration. Women in country music had the right to be free, to express themselves, and to break the unspoken rules that had bound them for too long. From that night on, Seely became a pioneer, opening the door for generations of bold female artists to follow. Her colleagues respected her just as deeply as her fans did. In a Nashville increasingly shaped by commercial trends, Seely was hailed as the keeper of traditional country's soul. Kelly Clarkson once admitted that whenever she sang a ballad, she studied Jeannie's ability to pour raw emotion into every word. Rising star Lainey Wilson called her a spiritual mother, the one who taught her, "Don't let Nashville swallow you whole. Keep the truth in every song." And the numbers tell their own story. Nearly 5,400 performances at the Grand Ole Opry, a staggering record few artists, no matter how famous, could ever touch. Each time Jeannie walked onto that stage, she wasn't just singing. She was carrying forward a tradition, the reminder that country music must always remain country. Jeannie Seely's legacy cannot be measured by awards or chart positions. It lives in the silence she commanded, in the tears she drew, in the millions of hearts she touched. For nearly 60 years, she proved that an honest voice, a whispering soul, could outlast fame, trends, and even time itself. Even as she became a living symbol of the Grand Ole Opry, Jeannie Seely never stopped walking back onto that stage. At an age when most of her peers had long retired to the shadows, she held fast, as if the stage itself were the very breath that kept her alive. Yet time spares no one. Behind the glittering lights, Jeannie's body began to falter, and whispers about her health slowly cast a shadow over Nashville. Fans asked themselves a painful question: how much longer could Miss Country Soul still whisper to them? In her 80s, Seely clung to her weekend ritual. Every Saturday night, she appeared at the Grand Ole Opry. Sometimes leaning on a cane, her steps slow and heavy. But the moment her hand touched the microphone, the voice returned, whispering, sorrowful, drawn straight from the depths of her soul. The audience fell silent, week after week, in reverence for a woman they now called the Enduring Flame, a living witness to nearly 6 decades of traditional country music. But beyond the spotlight, her body grew weaker. By 2022, her spine caused such relentless pain that she underwent multiple surgeries. In 2023, she endured a major abdominal operation, followed by months in intensive care, battling complications. Rumors swirled through Nashville. Will Miss Country Soul ever return? And yet, she did. In June 2024, Jeannie Seely surprised the Opry audience by walking back onto the stage and singing "Don't Touch Me." Her voice was frail, trembling, but the crowd rose to their feet. Many wept openly. They knew this might be the last time they would ever hear her sing in person. By early 2025, her health declined sharply. A severe bout of pneumonia, compounded by the toll of repeated surgeries, forced her into the hospital again and again. In July, she was admitted to the ICU in critical condition. Official statements were brief, almost evasive. Miss Country Soul is resting. Please keep her in your prayers. Then, on August 1st, 2025, the shock struck Nashville. Jeannie Seely was gone, at 85 years old. The official announcement read simply, "She passed away after a long battle with illness." But questions hung in the air. Was it complications from surgery, pneumonia, or something more, something her family chose to keep private? Her death cast a heavy mist of grief and speculation over Nashville. Because this was not just the passing of a singer, it was the eternal silence of a voice that had once whispered to an entire generation. For her fans, the most haunting image wasn't a medical report or a headline. It was the empty microphone at the Grand Ole Opry, glowing under the spotlight, waiting for a voice that would never return. When the last light at the Grand Ole Opry fades and the music slips into silence, Jeannie Seely's voice still lingers, whispering, aching, never truly gone. From a poor girl in Pennsylvania, raised in a leaky wooden house, she carved an impossible path to the sacred stage of country music. She sang of love, of heartbreak, of loss, not with flash or flourish, but with a heart etched by scars. And it was those very scars that gave birth to Miss Country Soul. Her life was never just about the spotlight. It was marked by broken marriages, a car crash that nearly ended her career, decades when Nashville turned its back, and finally, the relentless illness that claimed her final days. Yet what made Jeannie Seely immortal was the way she faced it all. She never stayed down. Each time she rose, she transformed pain into music, music in which millions found their own stories reflected. On August 1st, 2025, Jeannie left Nashville. But the Opry will forever echo with her voice. More than 5,400 times she walked onto that stage. A number that is more than a record. It is proof of her endurance, of a woman who dared to live, dared to hurt, and dared to sing until her final breath. So when people ask, what remains after Jeannie Seely? The answer is not in charts or trophies. It is in the tears of fans every time "Don't Touch Me" plays, in the respect of her peers, and in the Opry lights that will always shine down on the microphone, as if she were still standing there. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe, so together we can keep the flame of country music burning bright. And share your memories of Jeannie Seely, for it is your stories, your voices, that will keep Miss Country Soul alive forever.